everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, and today I'm going to show the long-awaited Kokiri, the next faction in Hyrule Conquest that I've been working on. It took me a while to get around to them because the last animation I was working on it took about, I think, 2.5 months to finish. It took me longer than any other animation I've done, probably because it was one of the longest cinematics, and it pretty much broke me because it took so long to make, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. You can go look at it on my channel. That's not the point of this video, but anyway, next up we are going to add the Kokiri in the game. Like the other factions, they've got 4 different heroes you can choose from. I'm just going to pick Saria because she's my favorite. I'll go into more detail about the heroes and all of their units and stuff and abilities in a later video like I did with the other 4 factions in the game. But for now, I'll just be focusing on the Kokiri units and their buildings and how their faction works and stuff. So, for those not familiar with the Kokiri, which I guess it's possible. They haven't been in that many Zelda games, but they're basically a race of eternally, like they're ageless sort of childlike creatures. I'm pretty sure they're based off of the inhabitants of Neverland, like from Peter Pan. They're basically these children that never grow up, and they worship this ginormous forest spirit creature called the Great Deku Tree, who's also their Titan unit. And I think they are a wonderful faction to include in the game. There's nothing quite like an army of ravenous, angry children wielding kitchen utensils and tools in battle. I'd probably compare them most to the hobbits from Lord of the Rings, because even though they're childlike, they have a little society, and they're able to function kind of like adults. So they're probably more like hobbits than children. They're just kind of like these small little childlike creatures that they're not entirely as innocent as they look. In fact, few people always wondered, like, why are the Kokiri, why are they a faction in a game about war and stuff? If you look at Ocarina of Time, there's evidence to suggest that probably not every single Kokiri, but a majority of them actually, maybe not even a majority of them, but they have the ability to craft weapons and shields. In fact, one of the starting swords in the game you get is the Kokiri sword, so clearly they know how to make weapons and use them. And in the Ocarina of Time manga, the more recent one, which technically isn't canon, but in that manga they actually are not constantly, but they're reenacting plays of battle and stuff, wearing these masks and things. So they have some knowledge of fighting, so I don't think it's that far of a stretch that they'd all sort of unite into an army to ward off invaders and stuff. But anyway, the Kokiri, what do they have that's different from other factions? Well, the way their bases work is a little bit different, and it will work in the next version. In fact, I'm going to completely butcher his name, but there's a scripter by the name of Exodarion. I think I pronounced that right. I'll have a link to his channel in the description of this video. He's basically he's been working on the AI of 0 AD specifically for this mod, and what he's done already is pretty awesome. If you go to his channel, you'll see he's gotten the AI to do all kinds of cool things, like build the appropriate buildings and units and actually upgrade buildings and stuff. So the way the Kokiri make their bases will work in the next version of the game. But anyway, how are their bases different? I guess I will demonstrate. So I have instant build on so that everything builds instantly and I won't waste your time. So we'll build, first of all, they have these groves that they build, and it seems pretty normal so far. You just select where you want to place it, and then they go off and then they build it. But what's different about the Kokiri buildings is when you click on the grove, you'll have all of these little options here. Some buildings have shared options like houses and watchtowers, but each different type of grove has a few unique options. Like this is their battle grove. This is basically their military building, so they can have like a barracks that trains their cavalry, a barracks that trains like the fairies and stuff. And what you do is on each grove you pick 3 of the various options and you mix and match different buildings, and depending on how you mix and match the buildings, the overall building will have different abilities and stuff. So like if you add a watchtower and a house to this grove here, the house will provide extra population, and it'll have an attack and a tower that you can garrison units in. So that is how the Kokiri buildings work. It's pretty cool. So I will just upgrade this grove right here with three different buildings. And as you can see, it upgrades it with the different buildings, and they're all combined together. And if you look down in the panel here, each of the three buildings' abilities are all down here. So they kind of have this, I call it modular, but they have this sort of like mix and match style of building, which I think is pretty cool. And the advantages of this is that their workers only have to build the grove that all of the other buildings are placed on. So after the workers build the grove, you can, send them to do resources and stuff. But the three buildings that you build on the grove do not require workers. So that saves a little bit of build time, that your workers can go off and do other things instead of standing around building the other buildings, which is needed for the Kokiri because their workers are not as industrious as some of the other factions. Another advantage is that all three of the buildings are basically one large building, so their bases will be a little bit easier to defend, and the Kokiri are a sort of defensive faction, so that's really handy for them. Some drawbacks, however, though, are they have three different buildings combined together, so if the enemy army like rolls in with tons of infantry, they can basically capture three buildings in one go. So the Kokiri buildings are really easy to capture if you're fighting against them. In fact, I would recommend, if you're going to siege a Kokiri base, it might actually be easier to capture their buildings instead of sieging them with siege weapons. So that's one disadvantage that they have with this type of building style. But anyway, I'll go ahead and build the rest of their groves and upgrade them so you can see some of the other things that they've got. And I'll build their fortress up here. I really like how their fortress turned out. And I'll upgrade this one too. Another thing about the Kokiri, and this is a really awesome thing about this engine that wasn't possible in Medieval 2. Let me just let them finish this building first, and then I'll go on about that. Wild animals are attacking me. Stupid levers. Alright, now that those wild animals are taken care of. Anyway, as I was saying, if you look carefully, you can see like little glowing sparkles and like little fairies and things flying around the Kokiri buildings. And if you look at the tree, you can see like little leaves falling around and stuff. All the Kokiri buildings have that ambient effect from Ocarina of Time with the little like dust and sparkles everywhere, and I just think it looks so awesome. It was not possible in Medieval 2, and it looks so cool here with all the little sparkles. I think it just adds so much ambience that just makes everything look great. So yeah, that's another thing about their buildings, is that they have little sparkles and everything. That's actually why I set it on a desert map, because I thought it'd be easier to see all the little green sparkles on the sort of brown and orangey background. I wanted to initially show this off in a forest map, but I think it's easier to see some of the smaller details in a desert setting. But anyway, another feature that the Kokiri have is their resources are a little more self-sufficient than some other factions. In fact, they can create bushes and trees in order to gather food and wood. I think, like right now, they just, you select the bushes and you place them kind of like you'd place farms for other factions. But what I think I want is that I think I want their buildings to just slowly and naturally generate bushes and trees around them that they can gather. I'm undecided on what I want to do yet. If I want them to just plop them down and grow them with their workers, or if I want the buildings to spawn them around. I'm not sure yet, but it'll be one of those two. So that's a cool thing that the Kokiri have that most other factions don't have, is they can plant their own trees and gather wood. Most other factions can only plant their food and gather food, so that's pretty cool. And I think that makes sense that the Kokiri would, I mean, they're so wood reliant that it makes sense that they'd be able to plant trees and grow them and continually harvest them. Anyway, what other features do they have? I guess I'll just go through their units. They all have custom voiceovers and stuff too, which is pretty cool. I guess I'll start with this unit I've selected here. This is the Kokiri Explorer, which is their scout unit. It's just a little unit that runs around pretty fast, and they're armed with the Deku Stick. And actually, another thing about their unit, which is a little more evident on the second one, is all of the civilian Kokiri have completely randomized outfits. They have randomized hair, they have randomized hats and weapons, and even their genders are randomized too, so you'll get pairs of male and female for some of their units, which is pretty cool. So their next unit is the Minutemen, which is like their basic militia unit. It's a pair of Kokiri that are just armed with whatever they can find. Like, they got frying pans and little sticks and bread rollers, and they'll just use whatever they can to defend the forest. They're like the really cheap sort of spammy unit, and they can also gather and harvest resources, so they're kind of like workers too. The next Kokiri unit they have is the Hunting Fox, which is this little creature right here. They are, they're not really a scout unit, they're kind of like a light sort of guard unit, and one of their abilities is they can hunt wild animals and gather food from wild animals, and they're actually better at gathering food than their standard workers. So if you're running low on food, you want to send these little foxes out to go hunt wild creatures and gather food from them. I'll have them go kill the chicken up here. So the Kokiri have a pretty decent early game advantage hunting down food with these little foxes. Anyway, what's their next unit? Getting attacked again by more wild animals. Bloody levers. So the next unit they have, which I believe is actually over here, is the Slingshotter, which is their basic ranged unit. They're just armed with a little slingshot, and they can fire, you know, little Deku Seeds at their enemies. They're a very, very weak ranged unit, but they're pretty cheap, and they can be trained in large numbers. And what I'm thinking I want is if a large enough group of them are together and attacking a single target, their bombardment of Deku Seeds will actually stun their target. I think that'd be a pretty cool ability. I'm not sure how to pull that off in the engine yet, but I think that'd be pretty great. And it would make them a little more useful instead of just being a cheap sort of spammy range unit. It'd actually give them a little bit of late game utility. My fox is under attack by more wild animals, and he's dead. And yes, as you can see there, I've added blood effects into the game. All the different races and stuff are gonna have like different colored blood, like the Zora are gonna have blue blood, so it'll be pretty cool. Anyway, let me bring out some more Kokiri units. I'll just train all of them and go through them one by one. You spread them all out. Alrighty. This isn't in any particular order, so we'll start with the... Come back here, guys. Don't run off and attack the wild animals. So anyway, the Grove Watcher right here, this is basically the low-level infantry unit of the Kokiri. They got the little Kokiri sword and the Deku shield from Ocarina of Time. There's nothing particularly special about them. They're just really easy to produce early on in a game. They're kind of like the bread and butter unit of the Kokiri army. I like the little voice effects I got for them. And then after him is the Emerald Archer, which is another returning unit from Hyrule Total War. It's a long-ranged archer unit that's actually pretty fast for an archer unit too. If you're playing as with Saria as your hero, you can actually upgrade their attack with a magic projectile, so they'll deal magic damage. But otherwise, they're just kind of like a standard archer unit with decent speed and range of their attack. And then, next up are some of my favorite units. These 4 units right here are part of the Mudman tribe of Faron, which are basically this sort of more feral, wild version of the Kokiri that kind of lives on the fringes of the forest. They have all these little masks on them, and they basically covered themselves in mud. I'd kind of describe them as Kokiri that are on the verge of becoming Skull Kids. Like, they live on the fringes of the forest, but they haven't quite gone mad like the Skull Kids yet, but they're still pretty vicious, and their sound effects are pretty cool too. But the first one is the Mudman Jabber, which is this crazy little kid right here. He's got a spear, so they're the low-level basic spearman unit for the Kokiri. The Kokiri are actually, they have pretty few options for anti-cavalry. They only got one more anti-cavalry unit in addition to him, so you'll want lots of these guys in your army if you're facing a horse-based faction like the Gerudo or Ordana province. But that's what this guy is. He's a little anti-cavalry unit. And then the second Mudman unit is the Wolf Killer, which is this crazy little girl armed with the mantis blades. Sorry, I think the voices are kind of funny. This unit is a fast attack unit that actually deals bonus damage against creature units. So this unit would be really good at attacking wild animals or like enemy creature units like the salamanders or the Dodongos that the Gorons have. They'd also be really good at taking down this unit that wandered off over here if you're fighting another Kokiri player, because it's a creature. I'll get to that unit later. But yeah, that's the Mudman Wolf Killer. And then next up is the Mudman Mantlet, which was a unit in medieval or Hyrule Total War that didn't really function the way I wanted to, but now it does. It is basically a slow-moving defensive unit that if you put in the formation with your army, they'll move up to the front. And what they do is they reduce the damage that all your units in the formation take from like ranged projectiles. So they basically blocked ranged attacks. And also, if you garrison them inside a building, they boost the resistance of the capture rate of buildings. So they're really good at defending bases and protecting your armies from ranged attacks. And they also have a short range attack themselves. This little girl right here will toss a spear at enemies. And I'm also thinking that maybe, this isn't included yet, but maybe down the road I'll make it so that if an enemy closes the gap, they'll go from being a ranged unit to like a spearman unit, and they'll just stab whatever's in front of them. They'll also be resistant to cavalry too, so they're not really an anti-cavalry unit like the normal spearmen, but they won't take a lot of damage from like a cavalry charge, so that's pretty cool. One of my favorite units just for the premise. I really like mantlets. I think they're really cool. They're a really cool type of unit, or type of yeah, I guess unit's the right word. Type of unit that was used historically. I think that's pretty cool. And then the fourth and final Mudman unit is the Battering Ram, which is these two little crazy guys. It's a really, really cheap and simple siege unit. You can bring it out earlier than most siege units, so you can use them to surprise an enemy and start ramming down their like outposts and their little resource places, and they're pretty good at like taking down like gates and walls. So if you mass like 10 of these guys and send them all at a gate, they'll batter it down pretty fast. However, unlike proper siege equipment, they're really weak and vulnerable. So they're vulnerable to ranged attacks too. So they're not very durable. They're really easy to kill off for a siege unit, but they're cheap and you can get them early on. So that's the sort of trade-off for their advantage. Alright, what other units did I miss? These two. Next up is the Enchantress, right here, which is a Kokiri mage unit. It's not a very strong mage unit. It's not currently implemented in the engine, but what I want them to do is, if you notice really carefully, they have two little fairies flying around them. And what I want them to do is when enemies launch ranged attacks at them or units nearby, every ranged attack that's in the radius of this mage unit, I want the fairies to deflect the ranged attacks back at the enemies. Not really every ranged attack, since there's only two fairies, so probably like every 2 projectiles they'll be able to deflect them back at enemies. I think that'd be a really cool ability. So right now they're just a sort of weak mage unit where the fairies go off and harass enemy units that get near them. Then the next unit, this one's actually a unique unit only available to Saria, so I won't go into too much detail about this until I get to the video about the heroes. But this unit is just so cool. It's the little Deku tree, and the sound effects for this guy are just awesome. Got the stomping sound effect and everything. In fact, if you look here, you can see the little leaves that are falling off of it as it moves. It's such a really cool ambient detail that just wasn't possible in Medieval 2. It looks so cool. Again, I'll go into more detail about these guys when I get to the video with Saria, because they're a unique unit that only she can train. Since I picked her, that's why I was able to train it. And what other units do they have? I actually need to build another grove so I can train some of their other units. So let's build another battle grove. And train some of their cavalry. Now this one up here can train a unit. Alrighty, I want the elk glade. And I'm going to train their 2 cavalry units. So the Kokiri have... what is that sound? Oh, these guys are attacking the levers up here. That's another thing that was added into the engine was explosion effects, courtesy of the Zero AD team. So now when projectiles hit the ground, they'll actually have little explosion effects, which is pretty great. Anyway, you guys stop attacking and get out of there. I'll get to that unit in a second. I want to show their cavalry first. So the two cavalry units that the Kokiri have are their deer units. The first one is the Buck Rider, and the second one is the Doe Trotter. The Buck Rider is just a very, very fast-moving melee cavalry unit. It's not very strong. It's very weak against attacks, but they're really, really fast. So if you're certain that, you know, you're outnumbered, you can just rush these guys away and get them out of there before they die. Same thing with their other cavalry unit, the Doe Trotter, which the rider's armed with a spear, which makes these guys anti-cavalry units. They're anti-cavalry cavalry units. And they're pretty light and weak, but because of their anti-cavalry attack, they're pretty good at going up against other cavalry units like knights and whatnot. So in sufficient numbers, these guys pretty much are better than spearmen. And then their next unit is their siege unit, the Boulder Shot, which is also from Hyrule Total War. Blasted levers killing my workers. Let's get these guys inside the castle. Anyway, where did they go? The Boulder Shot. Right there. This is the Kokiri's lone proper siege unit. It's a very small and cheap siege unit, but it gets the job done. The Kokiri aren't a very heavy siege faction, so in fact they're pretty light on just about everything. They're better at they have quite a few good like ranged and archer units, and they also have quite a few camouflage and stealth units. Now, stealth and camouflage isn't in the engine yet. Hopefully, either the developers or I can get it into the engine soon, because that'll really help some of the Kokiri units, and also the Gerudo and Sheikah too. It'll help them a lot. But anyway, Boulder Shot's just a light siege unit that you use to attack enemy bases and stuff. They fire little miniature boulders and whatnot, and it's basically a giant slingshot, which I just thought was the funniest thing ever for some reason. I guess it's not that funny, but I thought that was a really funny idea. That seems like something the Kokiri would do. Oh, we need a siege weapon. What do we do? Oh, we'll just take the slingshots and make them bigger. I think that's it for their units. Oh no, they have one more unit other than the unique units that the heroes get. They have the Shrine of Courage, which is also a unit returning from Hyrule Total War, although it functions a lot differently in this one. It's a cart pulled by a little deer, and it's basically a statue or idol of the goddess Furore. And what this unit does, we'll have to go outside of our territory to show it, so I'll go over here. Sounds like the Deku Tree's wandering off, killing things again. We'll get him back into our base. We'll get some other Kokiri to escort this little cart. If you also, it was more obvious with the Deku Tree, but you can hear it with this cart too. There's now ambient movement sound, so when this unit moves, you can actually hear the little cart moving. Darn levers are attacking me. But anyway, as you can see, this unit, what it does is it has a little territory ring around it. So when you move this unit outside your territory, it brings the ring with it. And what you can do is you can bring this into an enemy base, and it'll push away their territory. And if they don't have enough, like if they don't have a civic center generating the larger territory ring, what it'll do is it'll start to capture enemy buildings. You can also upgrade this unit with a few different abilities. You can upgrade it to boost the performance of everyone around it. Oh, it's about to die from these levers, sadly. You can upgrade it with several abilities, like you can get it little escorts, you can upgrade it with a slow healing aura, so it's a pretty handy support unit. And now it's dead. Bloody levers, man. Yeah, there's blood effects, as I said. I can't wait to add the other blood effects for like the Zora and whatnot. Oh, yes, one more thing that the Kokiri can do. Get all their units together so I can properly show it. I got these guys out here. Darn levers. This map actually isn't the best map to demonstrate things on because it's got levers wandering around everywhere, and every once in a while they'll just come into the base and attack me, but I might make a version of this map with no levers so I can show things without getting interrupted in the future. But anyway, let's get all these units together. So, one of the other things that Kokiri have, and technically this was possible in Medieval 2, but it works a lot better in 0 AD, because of course it does. When you build the ferry building right here, there's an upgrade you can get called Guardian Ferries. And when you upgrade it, if you look at all the Kokiri here, after I do the upgrade, it gives them all little guardian fairies like they had in Ocarina of Time, and the little fairies will follow them around and gives them a minor armor boost, but what the main advantage of the fairies are is it gives them magic armor, which is a very rare sort of, not literal magic armor, but it gives them resistance to magic damage. That's a better way of putting it. So if enemy mages start attacking your units, they'll shrug off a little bit of the damage from them. And defense against magic attacks is very rare across the board, so the Kokiri are one of the few factions where most of their units actually can get a minor protection for magic attacks. So yeah, the little fairies will follow their units around, including their little siege unit here, which is just so cool. I love it. Same thing with the mantlet here, the two little fairies are following it. Anyway. Whoop. This Deku Tree is just eager to slaughter everything. Stop killing the levers. I think that's about it for the Kokiri stuff. I guess I'll show their Titan. I want to garrison their units inside this the castle first, but I'll show their Titan. I'll go into more details about their Titan when I get to their hero video, but I'll go ahead and show him. I actually have a video of their Titan that I posted the other day. I'll go ahead and build a key building right there. And I'll show these units garrisoning themselves in the little Kokiri castle here. That looks cool. It's another thing I love about this engine is when you garrison units, it actually like shows them up on the walls, up in the little towers up here too. Like the little slingshot up here is shooting at the levers down there. You can even see the little bullet going at them. The little Deku seed. That's so cool. I love this game. Anyway, the last thing I will show before bringing an end to this video is the Titan unit of the Kokiri, which, if it wasn't obvious from their wonder, it's the Great Deku Tree, which is basically their creator, father figure. They're basically their god, more or less. Not sure what sound I'll replace it with. I want to replace the Temple of Time sound with something having to do with the Deku Tree, but I'm not sure yet. But anyway, I'm gonna make it so that when you train the Deku Tree, he'll actually disappear from the grove and then walk out, but that's not implemented yet. So right now there's 2 copies of him. Anyway, I freaking love this Titan. It's so cool. He's got stomping sound effects and everything, and you can see all the little leaves falling out of his canopy when he walks around. It's so awesome. It's so great. Anyway, I think that's about it for the Kokiri. I'm trying to think if they have any more unique features that none of the other factions have. I've gone through all of their units. Yeah, I think that's about it. Obviously there's still their 4 heroes and also the 4 unique units that the 4 heroes have. I'll go into more detail about those in the hero video for the Kokiri and the Goma, which I'll do after I finish the Goma. Which, speaking of, next up after I do a few more final touches on the Kokiri, I'm gonna get started on the Goma. I ask all of you to please, please, please be patient. The Goma are probably gonna take a little bit longer than most of the other factions because, unlike most of the factions, all of their units have different animation sets. Like, if you look at the Kokiri, most of their units, like, have the same shared animations because they're all, like, little humanoid children. Same thing with the Gorons. Most of their units do roughly the same thing, so they're all able to share from a pool of animations. But the Goma, pretty much every single unit of theirs needs their own animations, and that's probably going to take me a little while. So please, please bear with me. The Goma will take a bit longer than most of the factions in the game, so it'll probably be several weeks before I have something to show them. I mean, I'll show screenshots of, you know, their units on my Patreon and on the ModDB page as I finish their units, but I probably won't have them completely functioning for several more weeks, so please, please, please bear with me. They'll take a little bit longer than most factions because of the animations, but I'm really looking forward to the Goma. They're probably... I don't want to say they're my favorite faction, but they're definitely near the top. They're really cool. Their buildings are all animated too, because they're completely organic. They're basically the Zerg from StarCraft. If the Zerg were actually spiders, and they're just going to be really cool, and I can't wait to show them. So please bear with me. The Goma are up next, and they're going to take a little while to make. But anyway, hopefully the Kokiri look really cool to you guys. I'll probably release the Kokiri right around the time the Goma are done. I'll release both of them together. Or, if the next version of Zero AD comes out, whichever's first, I'm not sure yet. I'll probably wait till the Kokiri and Goma are done. My pattern is I make 2 factions and then I release them. And then I work on a cinematic, and then I work on 2 factions and then I release them. I'll probably stick with that pattern, so... Anyway, thank you guys for listening. If you like my work, I have a link to my Patreon below. Any support that you guys could give on there would be really, really welcome. I'm really thankful to all the people that are on my Patreon. You've basically given me the ability to work on this, not quite full-time yet, but almost full-time. It's still, you know, not quite there yet, but it's high enough to where I can devote more time to this than my day job, which is pretty great. And hopefully in the future it'll go up and I'll be able to just work on this full-time. But in the meantime, and I hope you enjoyed everything, and I hope you guys all have a good one.
Hey, listen!